Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ask a Doctor, our weekly, actually bi-weekly, live YouTube Q&A where we look for questions from you in the audience, and I present them to the doctor, and she answers them from a general informative position. This is meant for educational purposes and is not to be considered specific medical advice. We just want to make sure that you understand that this is for us all to learn together and for you to get a little taste of what we do here as an integrative medical practice, addressing conditions and challenges of life from a functional standpoint, and just really bringing all the tools of traditional standard medicine as well as sound, valid, evidence-based nutrition perspective, and of course we do things like IVs here and bioidentical hormone replacement. So I want to thank you for joining us, and the best way to participate is to ask your questions in the chat section of YouTube. You'll need to be logged in to do that, and you can just ask your questions over here on the side of the video. I'm keeping an eye on those, and I'll ask those to the doctor. We also get questions emailed into us, and you can send those questions in if you're having any trouble with YouTube to office@tlcdoctors.com. Those questions are then sent to me, and then we ask them on a following episode. And just so you know, you can join us here every Wednesday at 9:45 a.m. Pacific time. We're here for about a half an hour before Doctor gets started with her day and her patients here in the office. And she is also doing a additional live stream on Mondays, and that is at 5:30?
Yeah.
5:30 p.m. That's longer format, so there's more time there to get deeper into some of the concepts that we deal with here. So be sure to join us Monday as well at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Dr. Althorpe, thanks so much for your time today.
It's always fun. I do enjoy interacting, and I really like having another avenue for the patients to try and ask their questions, their general questions about the allopathic and integrative functional doctor merging together, how we would approach this.
Right.
So it's fun for me. I enjoy doing it. But I do hope that they like and subscribe and write a comment. That'll help us with our access and the tools we have for doing things like this. So please share it with their friends and family.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, I've got quite a few questions from email. I see some questions coming in on the chat. Where would you like to start today?
Anywhere is fine. I also have some articles as well.
Okay. Do you want to start with those? Or
yeah,
okay.
I think I will. John Solomon runs Just the News, and he has published in it some interesting material as of July 2nd, I believe this is. No, July 1st. These are titled Prominent Medical Journals, so there are more than one. Highlight harm to children from masks, death risks from COVID vaccines. And in this article, he's talking about some of the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics. Last week, also in the Journal of Vaccines, affiliated with the American Society of Virology, published research that estimates every 3 COVID-19 deaths prevented by vaccination are offset by 2 deaths inflicted by vaccination using Israeli and European data. And the paper that was shared the lead author was a Dr. Harold Wallach, W-A-L-A-C-H, a professor in Poznan University of the Medical Sciences Pediatric Clinic in Poland. And I just want to pause here and say, make sure that you don't have a bias that the only good science comes from the United States. There are just as highly qualified scientists in Poland and the Netherlands and Brazil and all over the world. So Professor Wallach states, writing and also he's with the University of Witten, Herdrich's psychology department in Germany. Most of the complaints reported by children in a German-wide register on mask wearing include irritability, headache, and reluctance to go to school. And these can be understood as consequences of the elevated carbon dioxide levels in inhaled air. The JAMA Pediatrics paper said it cited the dead space volume of the mask, which collects exhaled carbon dioxide quickly after a short time will increase. And they found, for instance, in Germany, 2,000 parts per million of CO2, or 0.2%, is the limit for closed rooms, carbon dioxide in a closed room, in the classroom in German law. The child with the lowest CO2 levels was 3 times higher than this limit in their studies, while one 7-year-old was measured with 25,000 parts per million versus 2,000 parts per million. So they go on to criticize and scrutinize these articles and so forth. So the argument is now occurring where they're starting to retract this publication. So I have another article about retraction of the paper on vaccines deaths spurs a call for more scrutiny of COVID-19 death reports. And so this created a firestorm over last week. And the question is, should public health authorities scrutinize deaths attributed to COVID-19 as closely as they scrutinize deaths attributed to the COVID-19 vaccines? So that article and some of the other items about the children and should they get vaccines, should they wear masks, is creating a firestorm. And this is being published, and now they're starting to retract these publications. And so the retraction notice in the Journal of Vaccines, several of the editorial board members, their complaint was they can't satisfactorily answer their claims about 2 in 3 deaths are attributed to the vaccines, and they criticize that because of lack of data, the unreliability of adverse reactions, and lack of autopsies. Then Dr. Wallach and other scientists come back saying, well, there isn't that scrutiny of those that were ascribed to the COVID-19 disease death to have autopsies and so forth. So why did you retract the paper? They never in the paper argued that these were studies based on autopsies or scientific reports of scrutinization of each death, because we don't have that data. Why don't we have that data? The best thing we have are all these reports to discuss statistically from vastly vaccinated countries like Israel. And so we're starting to see more and more retractions of papers, and it's becoming laughable when we look at all this material and arguments about masking and so forth. So they're happy that at least the argument is on the table now that if you're going to say there were so many deaths due to COVID, let's talk about how many deaths are really due to adverse reactions and the value of the masks and so forth. So I find this an interesting, and finally I'm glad to see this argument happening. I'm sad to see that there are editors in scientific journals that are retracting published material. Science is all about the conversation. It's not about censorship. Science is challenging the data. So they have no problem with it being challenged. They have the right to argue both for or against certain issues. And then, of course, there is the report from the New England Journal of Medicine about preliminary findings of mRNA COVID vaccine safety in pregnancies. And so in that, there's criticism of that. This was published in April 21, 2021. And the arguments on that are, when you look at the total, and if you're not familiar with how to read scientific articles, you can kind of help people to come to a conclusion, So the article about the adverse reactions in pregnancies and all the lost pregnancies, they downplay the statistics because they talk about the total number of women enrolled in the pregnancy study, and 9 months hadn't gone by or hasn't gone by since we started vaccinating. So you can't give an absolute number. And they take in the number of women who were in their last trimester, more of which had a completed, if they enrolled in the vaccination at 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, they would have completed their pregnancy. And so they're counting these as completions. But if you look at the actual data, you'll find that the first and second trimester is where we're seeing the volume of miscarriages occurring, and that's where we are getting doctors like Dr. McCullough and others who are prominent, noteworthy physicians talking about 8 times increase loss of the pregnancy, because they were the ones in the earlier impact, not the final trimester. So you have to scrutinize how you're looking at these articles, and let us discuss them, let us question them. So I'm putting this up for debate. Another sad article that has come out since the past year. This is published in Family Practice News. There's a staggering doubling of the type 2 diabetes in children during the pandemics. The incidence of type 2 diabetes in children appears to have doubled during the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the comments in this report, the proportions of youth with new onset type 2 diabetes who presented in diabetic ketoacidosis rose from 2 or 4% pre-pandemic 2019 compared to 33 that presented in this past 1 year. And the other thing is they saw a racial disparity, that this was rising quicker and more severely in the Black and Hispanic races for children. So that's a sad thing to see, that their lack of play and maybe lack of follow-up with their pediatricians, less doctor visits. So we saw a doubling of the type 2 diabetes. Anyway,
right. It makes sense too. Being a parent during the pandemic, a lot of kids couldn't go to school; they had to stay home, and parents who were working had to arrange childcare or take time off from work. And so, how do you feed the kids? What's quick and easy? Packaged, processed foods, more sugar and such, versus square breakfast and then go to school for a square lunch. So, unfortunately, that's not much of a surprise.
Yes.
Okay, why don't we get into some questions?
Okay.
I have, we'll start with the chat. There's a question on there, and then why don't we do like a little bit of a rapid fire from some of these questions that were emailed in previously. Okay, Cheryl has asked, doing 50 net carbs a day after 3 days, my glycogen stores are low, needing to eat carbs, doing 3 tabs of fat a day. How do I overcome this?
3 tabs of fat?
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
I'm not sure what she means by 3 tabs of fat a day. Maybe butter tabs?
I don't know.
Okay.
I've never seen that expression.
And I wonder why she's saying her glycogen stores are low. Well, if you're eating very low carbs, then yes, your glycogen stores are going to be lower.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point.
Yes.
Maybe she's 3 tablespoons of fat a day. Okay, she's clarified.
Okay.
Tablespoon.
3 tablespoons of fat a day. Read the question to me again.
Yeah. 50 net carbs a day, so that's net carbs too. That's
Okay.
not total carbs.
Right.
After 3 days, glycogen stores are low, needing to eat carbs, doing 3 tablespoons of fat a day.
So, how do you know that your glycogen levels are low? Are you doing a urine test for ketones? Okay. The only time that your glycogen storage is going to be low is if your ketones are starting to be produced, because we also have gluconeogenesis. So once the liver is depleted and some in the muscle, there's very little there, but once that's depleted, then your liver will kick into some degree of gluconeogenesis. Therefore, this is for the otherwise healthy person who's a non-diabetic we're talking about. then that person, if they urinate and their urine keto strip turns pink or rose or purple, then we know that they've depleted their glycogen stores. So I don't think you can say you've depleted your glycogen stores until you've proven that.
And it sounds like she's 3 days in, which is pretty
early on. A man has so much muscle mass, it takes about 2 days for him, when he goes on a very low carb diet, especially if he exercises, to start urinating out ketones and burning fat.
Right.
A woman has less muscle mass, and this typically takes 3 days. So I would encourage that this person who's asking the question to hang in there and get urine dipsticks for ketones. You can go to any pharmacy and do that, and see if you're urinating out ketones.
And if you're used to eating a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sugar, there is going to be that ketone flu. It is tough the first couple of days to get over that hump where your body starts to transition into using ketones as energy instead of fat.
I'm going to predict that this person has not used up their glycogen storage, because 50 net carbs means that the carbs
could be 80. And she's subtracting the fiber.
Right, she's subtracting the fiber. So I would say do that, and the direction is to go away from so many carbs. And this is well known to improve metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, improve longevity. So whatever you have to go through, that's what you need to do to have that vitality, the better mental clarity. And I'm glad she's using oil. Now, if she's using oil, I don't like seed oils. If you take extra virgin olive oil, a high quality one, I'll give you a pass on that. But I think that if you're eating the yolks of eggs and you're eating meat and you're eating fish, you're going to get fat there, and butter to cook it in. That would be the direction I would go. I would not purpose to abnormally take in oils. I would focus on exercise and watching your urine for ketones, because everyone's different, okay? And it takes me, for as many years as I've been doing this, it takes me 3 days to see my urine turn into ketones.
And that's usually when you're fasting, when you're doing no carbs.
Right, yeah. When I'm eating nothing.
Right.
When I'm eating nothing.
So Cheryl, I just want to encourage you that what you're going through is normal when you're transitioning to a lower carb diet. It is more difficult for some than others. It's not easy, but the benefits that you're going to reap on the back end of that are wonderful. Just stick with it. And even if you were fasting for 3 days, yes, you're going to crave carbs and your body's going to say, I want to eat, I want to eat. It's going to go through that panic mode. But on the other side of that, it does get easier. Mm-hmm. And those fats are important because they do help to satiate you.
Yes. That's why I use my bars when I go on a 5-day fast, because Labor Day will be coming up here sooner than you realize. Then I do another 5-day fast. I come off my fast using my doctor's nutrition bar. That's so chock full of phospholipids and fiber. And I keep on testing my urine, and the urine stays in that nice rose red ketones. And often I will just eat my bars 2 a day for a week before I start eating other regular food.
Okay. Now let's get into some questions here. So this one might take a little bit of research, but Richard asked a question. He says, ask Dr. Elthorpe to talk about the new FDA-approved T-cell detection for previous exposure to COVID-19 and or existing T-cell, B-cell natural killer cell protection against COVID-19. The particular test I'm interested in is the T-Detect and how to qualify for receiving the test. Are you familiar with that?
Somewhat, yes. I have been ordering a SARS-CoV-2 antibody titer quantitative, okay? And that is looking at your antibodies for that. Now that is not taking out, because antibodies are the byproduct of B cells, okay? And that's your humoral side. the innate immune system is what he's talking about, and that's more in the world and realm of research, and I have never ordered one of those yet. T-cell immunity is your memory. CD4, CD8 T cells, helper cells, have this memory in them to react to a re-exposure of the virus itself, and it is a more complete. If you've had the SARS-CoV-2 virus and you made antibodies to it, you didn't feel sick, your body handled it, you wouldn't necessarily have antibodies long-lasting if the infection is gone. But we're finding that the T cells and the ability to produce antibodies seems to be quite long-lived in those who do in fact have had the disease. In fact, there's an argument in science that needs to be discussed whether or not you should receive vaccination once you think you've had or can prove that you've had it in the past. And how robust is it? Is the natural exposure to COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 and the disease COVID-19, if you had it, is that a more robust immunological response than vaccinations? Because when you vaccinate someone, that is to a specific spike protein, where the actual exposure is to the entirety of the virus and all the components in it. There's many other components on the cell membrane that you react to. That's why we feel it's a better and more robust, long-living reaction. That's another argument to say, why should young people have this? Because I would think, and why do we need to push vaccines if there's probably a large portion of Americans who in fact have had SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, whether they knew it or not, and the need for vast vaccination needs to be debated.
Okay. Next question is from Rose, and she asks, what natural methods can a person do or take when blood pressure medications fail to control your numbers?
Blood pressure medicines fail to control your numbers. Well, I would certainly, if I was seeing this person, I would want to know how much water they drink every day. I would want to know what their serum magnesium level was. I would want to know what their sleep hygiene is. When are they going to bed? I would want to know what their salt intake is, not because I'm against salt, because actually too little salt can be an aggravating issue as well. I would want to ask them if they're doing any form of exercise, and I would want to see what their stresses are in their life. I would want to look at their cortisol, their adrenal function, DHEA, the precursor for it. I would want to know their weight. I would want to know their insulin, because the higher the insulin, and the high-carb American lifestyle has created high insulin so that the ranges on these silly labs are too tolerant for the population averages, and so insulin can stimulate thickness of the intima, the lining of the blood vessel, and make it stiffer, fatter. So it's a multifactorial thing, and this is lifestyle. This is the chronic degenerative diseases that are really causing 89-94% of all American health dollar cost. And you need time with your doctor, you need a plan with your doctor to address these, rather than some mass clinic where they're just giving you a prescription, move on, you have to have a doctor and an engagement where that doctor is going to ponder with you, engage with you in this path, and give a follow-up to say, let's try this, let's cut the carbs, let's create an absolute water volume that you have to do, let's create a absolute aerobic activity and an absolute time you have to go to bed, and then we'll wait on the lab results coming in.
Right. Okay. We have a question from Patricia who asks, I am unvaccinated and would love to know your thoughts on whether I should feel obligated to reveal this fact to my friends who are vaccinated when we plan to hang out or if they're coming to my house. I tend to not want to share this info because it usually sparks a conversation about why, etc. And I would rather not have to defend my choice or tell them my reasons since they are already vaccinated. Thank you for helping me navigate this sticky territory.
Well, that's your private medical information, and you are under no obligation to share your state of health with anyone or any aspect about your personal health.
No, I wouldn't ask a friend, just in casual conversation, have you ever had an abortion?
Right,
but
exactly.
It's okay to ask about whether somebody's chosen to make the personal choice whether or not to get a vaccine.
Right, and we need this debate. I don't know how many retractions we've had so far. I'm trying to look at the news, scour the news every week and bring up these questions that need to be discussed. What
I say?
What do you say?
I get this question a lot.
Okay.
Somebody asks me if I'm vaccinated. I say, I just turn around. Have you been? And then, why do you want it? Well, you're asking me, have you been vaccinated? Yes, that's usually the answer because people that are asking tend to be vaccinated. Okay. Do you believe that it works? Great. Well, then you're protected. Does it matter whether I have or not? And that's my personal choice.
That's a good answer, Talon. There's a lot of argument that the people who, in the literature, it looks like the science is building up that vaccinated people are the larger body of people. For instance, in England, with this alleged Delta variant, the question is actually valid to say, are the vaccines working? It's valid to say, are the vaccines effective? Are the vaccines necessary? A jab in every arm, when you have a 99.98 survivability, if you're under the age of 45, then you have to ask, are they necessary? Are they effective? And if you're not asking about prevention, like all of my patients here, long before there was any COVID-19, we've had flu seasons every year. So for decades, I've been giving them vitamin D. For decades, I've been giving them a multivitamin with zinc in it. For decades, I've been telling them not to get fat and have a high blood sugar that suppresses the immune system. So I've done the experiment here. We went through the year and a half of the pandemic with a tremendous improved, healthy population with almost no consequence of this. No hospitalizations or deaths. So there are so many articles and scientific peer-reviewed articles on other things you can do besides the D and the zinc. Quercetin is another one. A low-carb diet, getting a good night's sleep, melatonin at night, medications with early treatment, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, budesonide, steroid inhalers. There are so many things. The question is, do you need a vaccine? So we have seen so many flip-flopping statements from bureaucracy at government platforms that you cannot look to a centralized government program. You can get maybe guidances, and that's all there are is guidances. You have to remember this is a non-FDA approved vaccination. You have to understand this is emergency use authorization. And the argument and debate is ensuing that had they looked at hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, could they have even gotten the emergency use? Because part of the law that states the only way you get emergency use is if there's no other available treatment. And I think we have hundreds of thousands of physicians now with published data in randomized controlled trials indeed stating that these other treatments are certainly valid. So no, you don't need to have anyone ask you about your vaccine status. It's not their business.
Right.
Rather, you need to ask whether or not it's necessary at all to do it. and if we need to review the government's procedures in this past year and a half.
All right, we're just about out of time, but I saw one question come in on the chat that I think we can answer. Aubrey asks, is your office familiar with breast implant illness? Many ladies like myself have removed implants but still feel symptoms similar to hypothyroid, but blood work is quote-unquote normal. Most ladies also have done detoxes, changed diet, etc., but doctors cannot understand or see what is wrong.
Yes, we're familiar with breast implant illness, and this is an autoimmune phenomena. And anytime you put that's why they are against root canals. That's why we're concerned about hip replacements, knee replacements, valve replacements, because we know that there is an immune response to anything you place inside of yourself. So this is an autoimmune phenomena. And when you have an intricate immune system, and that immune system perceives parts of the device that's in you, they'll make antibodies, and this may cross-reference over to other healthy tissues in your body, and it'll start attacking it. And then, of course, the chemicals, the excipiation of these things into your body can trigger an autoimmune response. So this is a reason to be happy with the way God made you, and to stop trying to, modify our appearances with, like all these Botox injections. I've seen so many reactions with that. I think we should embrace the beauty of humanity the way it is. But yes, we work to look at many ways the immune system is impacted, and it's largely through the gut. Are there specialty studies like anti-silicone antibodies, anti-Lasix antibodies? Yes, these do exist, but these are in multiple chemical sensitivity specialties. There used to be a doctor, I don't think he's working anymore, in Dr. Lee in Dallas, Texas, but his descendant, you might say, his protege is out there. That's Dr. Lee, chemical sensitivity. You could Google for Texas. I think his name is still on the clinic, and then you can see what they're doing and what they're recommending. So yes, detoxing, improving your microcirculation, eating a low-carb diet, and taking systemic enzymes tend to be very, very anti-inflammatory and helpful. Turmeric, drinking enough water, getting a good night hygiene, sleep, things like that would be helpful.
Right. And I'm recalling that ozone and UBI actually help with autoimmune disorders and sort of stabilizing overreactive or underreactive immune systems.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for your questions and your attention today. We are here every Wednesday at 9:45 a.m. Pacific, as well as Monday evenings for a longer format that's just with Dr. Ellithorpe, so you can join us Mondays at 5:30, and that is usually about an hour, sometimes a little bit longer. Let's see, what else? If you haven't already, please do tell your friends and family about the channel. If you're getting value from this, share this and subscribe to the channel. We have some really exciting things in the work. We're actually doing some construction on one of the offices nearby so that we can have a dedicated space for this, and we're going to be rolling out more content. We're seeing a lot of questions, similar questions coming in. So we're going to produce little shorts that aren't live but are a little bit more polished to answer some of these questions where people seeking this kind of information can go and get some help.
Great.
Well, thanks for your time. Hope you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you here next Wednesday at 9:45 a.m. Pacific and Monday at 5:30 p.m. If I didn't get to your question today, you can email it in to us. I have some further questions that we didn't have time to get to today, but we keep these on the back burner to get answered. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Until then, be well.
God bless.